Hey everybody, welcome to the Off the Shelf Board Game Review video review channel here on YouTube, and this video is part of a series of videos entitled My Top 51 Board Games of All Time. Now I'm not going to go over all the want stuff. If you want all the intro and the introduction and the basics, what I was looking for in my top 51 games, check out the video that goes over and highlights everything with the introduction video. This video you're looking at right here is going to be numbers 40 all the way to 31. Now, as most of these lists will always tend to do, it is going to be a little bit of want stuff. But I'm going to do a little bit cooler stuff because I'm going to have every one of these board games laid out on the table so I can show you just why these board games are so cool. So that's enough of the little bit of the talking. Let's go ahead and start this with number 40. Number 40 on the list is Core Worlds from Andrew Parks, a deck building game for 2 to 5 players with a space theme. And when I'm talking about Core Worlds, I'm specifically talking about with the first expansion, which happens to be the Galactic Orders expansion, which makes, let's be honest here, it's a good game, but it makes a good game a great game. And what's so special about Core Worlds? Well, okay, it's a deck building game. It's a space themed deck building game. We've seen space games before, we've seen deck building games before, but Core Worlds does a few things to make it stand out from the pack. First of all, every single player gets a deck of cards, which is a little bit unique for every single one of the players, because they get one special card that's unique to the one faction and it can kind of help affect your strategies. Not only that, this game had a really cool mechanic which made sure that the evolution of the game, every time you played it, had a flow to it that was very awesome to play. See, every time you play the game, you're going to lay out these cards which are going to form your central pile of cards which you're using to buy. You're going to buy your spaceships, you're going to buy your shock troops, your base objectives of conquer planets. And you're going to do everything you can to get up your energy, which is going to allow you to do all the actions you need to do, which is allow you to conquer the planets, get all these cards, gain victory points, and, win the game. But the cool thing here is that all these cards came out in a specific order, shuffled up, randomized, but they were coming out in a special order. Because you had your deck 1 cards, so the first round and the second round is only going to use the first age or the first section cards. Rounds 3 and 4 are only going to use the Sector 2 cards. Rounds 5 and 6 are only going to use the Sector 3 cards, 7, 8, Sector 4 cards, 9, 10, Sector 5 cards. So there was randomization in the game, but the game had a very nice flow to it, and the system was very smartly designed. It was a really good, and still is a very good deck building game that incorporates a really cool space theme. I'm not going to lie, I am kind of a space junkie, along with being a junkie for civilization style games. I'm not afraid to admit it. But it made it so that your faction was a little bit unique because you have one card that's unique to your faction. I'll pick these guys up just to show you what I mean, because I will shuffle through these and pretend I was prepared, but Simon the Fox only exists in this faction. If you want to play with Simon the Fox, you got to pick this faction. One of these factions has the Prince card. Every one of these factions has their own little cool thing. But what the Galactic Orders expansion added to the game, which made the game even so much better, is these special cards right here. As you purchase cards and do various action, you're going to get extra influence with every one of these specific factions, and you can burn your influence and take extra actions, which kind of influence how you want to build your deck. You can just do a general thing of looking at the card that's in the purchase and go, that's a pretty good card, but if I get this card over here, it's not going to help me as much, but it's going to give me some factions, some influence with this guild right here, and I can use this special ability to get even more points. So that's going to influence how I'm going to purchase the cards. So Core Worlds was a deck building game with a really cool space theme for 2 to 5 players, and it's number 40 on my top 51 board games of all time. Number 39 on my list is Puzzle Strike by Sterling Games. It's actually, on the surface, you may say it's a deck building game, and I just made the realization that number 40 is a deck building game, and number 39 almost technically is a deck building game. Hey, maybe we're seeing a theme here, but this is the way it is. See, Puzzle Strike is a game that is kind of like a deck building game, but instead of having cards, you have chips in a bag, and on every single player's turn, they're going to be pouring out the chips out of the bag, and they're going to do actions based on what these chips allow them to do, and it may just seem like a typical deck building game just using these chips. So you may wonder, what is so cool about Puzzle Strike that makes it number 39 on my all-time favorite board games? And there's actually a lot of reasons why this game is on that part of the list. See, Puzzle Strike actually emulates a classic game that I spent a lot of time playing when I was younger that evolved Tetris, because this isn't basically Puzzle Fighter. Now, Puzzle Fighter, if you're not familiar with the game, it was basically an arcade game that used all the characters from Street Fighter And they were both, each player had one of their little Street Fighter characters on the side of the screen. All these gems would start falling from the screen. Your objective was to make combos with those gems falling down from the screen. And if you can make a good enough combo, all those chips that you just comboed, those gems, will be tossed over on the other player's screen, filling up their screen. And everybody's played Tetris. When all the gems or the blocks or whatever get to the top of the screen, you've lost. Well, this game emulates that perfectly by taking that game design and bringing it down in a board game. See, in Puzzle Strike, like I said, all the players are going to have their chips in their hand. They're going to be pulling these chips out, and they're going to allow them to perform actions. Now, these actions are going to send these gems over onto the other player's board. If at any time a player ever has 10 gems on their board at the end of the turn, not the start of the turn, that's a really important clarification, but if they ever have 10 gems at the end of their turn, they've lost the game. So what players are going to be doing is they're going to be using these other chips and these other gems and these other abilities to send all these gems over to the other players' boards to knock them out of the game. And the cool thing about this game is it really is like Street Fighter and the Puzzle Fighter derivative that was based off of Street Fighter and Tetris. Because every one of the players is going to pick a special character. Now, all these characters come with 3 chips that have very specific abilities and makes them feel like a very thematic fighter. And none of these fighters play the same. They all play very, very different. And they have the 3 chips that have very special abilities that are going to allow them to do combos, allow them to send these gems over to the other player's tableau, and make them get overloaded on their tableau so they lose the game. Cool thing about the game is it did come with another standalone expansion, which has 12 more fighters for a total of 24 fighters, all of them very unique. But quick little warning, these fighters are a lot more advanced, so if this is the game you're looking for, check out Puzzle Strike 3rd edition, the basic pink box, because all these fighters are fantastic. Once you get good at the game, add in the Shadows expansion, and you have one heck of a fun game that takes a very unique spin on the deck building game by creating a puzzle game where you're drawing chips out of a bag and trying to defeat your opponent in the ultimate form of puzzle fighter. Number 30 on the list is Red 7. Now, Red 7 is an absolutely fantastic game that definitely belongs on any top list of games of all time because it's such a simple appearing game that is so deep, so strategic, and so fantastic. See, Red 7 is a game that you can actually teach somebody how to play in 10 seconds or less. Now you're like, no, there's no way you can teach in less than 10 seconds. Yeah, you can. The objective of Red 7 is at the end of your turn not to be losing. How do you know if you're losing? Read the card in the center of the table. Was that in less than 10 seconds? Wasn't time stop or wasn't stopwatching it, but I'm pretty sure that was less than 10 seconds. See, in Red 7, the objective of the game is at the end of your turn, you just cannot be losing the game. Simple request. How do you find out if you're losing the game? Read the card. It tells you if you're losing at the end of the game or not. At the start of the game, you're currently playing red. The rules say you have to have the highest card on the tableau in your personal tableau at the end of your turn. So if I have a 2, and another player has a 2, well, we're both tied, except we're not tied because you'll get the color wheel chart to tell you if you're managed to be winning or not. If you look at the color wheel chart, you see that green is higher up on the chart than 2, or than blue, or indigo. I'm not colorblind, I swear. But you see that I am currently not winning the game. So the current rule of the game is at the end of my turn, I must be winning the game. I'm not winning the game, so I need to play a card. So I can play another 2, because I'm playing very smart, and 2 red is higher up on the list than 2 green. So now this player has to play a card to make sure at the end of the turn they're winning. So they can play another card, such as a 7, which is higher than a 2, or they can change the rules of the game by discarding a card to the center of the pile, and now the rules of the game have changed. You must have the most cards below 4. So this player is still losing, so that's probably not a good card to play for them. So they may play it down like this, but then they may play another card that's going to change the rules again. But again, they want to make sure they're still winning the game, because if at the end of your round you're not winning the game, you've lost Red 7. So that's actually the basic rules for Red 7. And you may look at it and go, okay, quick and easy game. I can see why somebody may like it. But why is it number 38 on the list? Well, the reason why it's number 38 on the list is because those are just the basic rules of the game. And those are the rules that you teach people to get them sucked in the game. Once people see how kind of devious the game can be, you start throwing in the extra rules where every single odd card that you play has an additional rule that you must follow. And if you can't follow those additional rules, again, you're in trouble, because at the end of your turn, you must be winning the game. Once you've shown people how to play the rules with the odd cards, then you start going to the tournament rules, where you're going to play multiple rounds and reach a certain amount of victory points. And that's where the mad genius of the game comes in, because you may have rounds that you may sacrifice just to get the extra victory points, which creates this very large metagame that can be played in 15 minutes or less with a lot of brain power, a lot of deviousness, and a lot of fantastic fun. That's Red 7. Number 37 on the list is the Manhattan Project, especially with the first expansion that comes with the game, which is the Manhattan Project Second Stage. Now, the Manhattan Project is a fantastic worker placement game, and I don't want to keep using the word fantastic, but as we get higher up on my list, they're all going to be fantastic. I just can't lie to you here. These games all rock. But what this game is it's a worker placement game in the atomic age that has a really cool theme because all the players are national powers trying to be the first one to win the atomic race to build the first atomic bomb. And, well, unfortunately, we're not going to do good things with those atomic bombs, but we are trying to win the war of the atomic race so we can enter, well, the Cold War, which became a very interesting age in our history. But let's not get into that because this is actually the Manhattan Project. And in the Manhattan Project, this is a worker placement game where players are going to have workers. They're going to place them out on various locations. And before we go anywhere, these are some really awesome pieces. These pieces are thicker than some board games I've actually seen. Not the board game package, the boards that come with the game. That's how thick these pieces are. But I'm taking a little digression here. Anyways, the idea of the game is it's a worker placement game. We've all played worker placement games before. The idea of worker placement game is I take this spot. Guess what? You can't take that spot until I reset. So we play worker placement games. It has a really cool theme. There's a pretty more unique theme. So what is it about this game that makes it so awesome? Well, the idea about this game is, yes, you have a really solid worker placement game. You have a sliding tableau across the board where resource locations are going to slowly get cheaper as they move across the board. So it's a race and you're kind of a gamble when you're playing the game. Do I take this location now that I really, really need that's only going to cost 10? Or do I risk it and wait for it to go lower on prices where another player may snatch it up and take it away from me? So you have to fight that. You also have to fight the thing where you're trying to get different resources, uranium and yellow cake. I hope I got that right because I may have just messed up on the terms. And if I did, make fun of me in the comments down below and I'll be sure to appreciate it. Actually, I do appreciate it. I'm just kidding. But you're trying to get those resources because you are trying to build the atomic bomb. Not just any atomic bomb, but you're trying to build a certain amount of atomic bombs based on the player count. And the first person to get that player, or I'm sorry, the first person to get to that amount of victory points by building these atomic bombs is going to win the game. Now, the game is very, very in your face, very cutthroat, and very direct. And this is actually the reason why I like this game. A lot of your worker placement games, it's very subtle, very subdued cutthroatness. Basically, it's a race where I'm just trying to get to the space before you do, and I want to make sure that I can capitalize on this space more than you can capitalize on this space. So I enjoy that. I enjoy worker placement games. Matter of fact, nope, not going to give a spoiler because that's higher on my list. But there is a worker placement game higher up on my list. But why do I like this game so much? Well, I like it because of the simple fact that it adds in one more thing that's very unique. You can attack your opponent's different locations, and they have to be able to protect their locations. So you can make a fleet of bombers, increase the strength of your bombers, while your opponents must raise their fleet of fighters, because if their fleet of fighters is not high enough, they can't stop your bombers, and then you can send your bombers out there to blow up their locations. So you may have a player who's sitting fat, dumb, and happy on this location, getting lots of resources, getting lots of victory points, then every other player at the table is going to look at him and say, well, you know what? I don't think you need that spot anymore, so I'm going to blow it up. But it can actually be more subtle than that because you don't have to blow it up. You can send spies out to other players and steal their locations from them. So the game has a lot more bloodthirstiness, a lot more directness, and a lot more vileness to make a worker placement game that goes up from a good worker placement game to an awesome worker placement game. Number 36 on the list is Tragedy Looper. Now, this is a very special game to me, not just because of why I enjoy the game, but because the amount of mental gymnastics that's going on in this game between the mastermind and the other players is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I can't show you too much about this game because just like when I did my actual video review of this game, I made sure to make sure there was no spoilers. I didn't spoil the mastermind's book at all. I actually created a very fake scenario just to try to teach you how to play the game because, again, I don't want to ruin the game for players. So I'm going to give you a very generic overview of this game because I don't want to ruin it at all, but this is an absolutely brilliant game design. It's a mental game that if you like games such as, or you like things such as Sherlock Holmes, or games where it's a battle of the wills, a battle of the minds, this is the game for you. But in Tragedy Looper, the players are representing players who are interacting with these characters at these locations. One player is basically, just to use a generic term, let's say one player is an evil Time Lord. And they're trying to disrupt the timeline to bring ruin and tragedy for some reason. Well, because they're a bad guy, and that's what Time Lords seem to want to do when they're bad Time Lords. The other players are time travelers who are using various devices to travel through time, and they've all met in the same timeline, and they know that there's going to be something happening produced by this Time Lord, and they must figure out what that thing is, how that thing is going to happen, and then they must stop that thing from happening. Here's the trick. They enter the timeline with zero information, so it's very challenging for them to figure out exactly just what is going on. On players' turns, each one of the single players, the protagonists who are trying to do good things, each one of them gets a chance to play one card down, whether it's going to be a card on a person or play a card down on a location, but then the mastermind gets a chance to play cards, again, either on people or they get to play them on locations to do various things. And then these cards are all going to be flipped over and they're going to be revealed by the mastermind who's going to carry out exactly what these cards are going to do. And these cards will allow things such as people to move, allow intrigue to be added to the board, add paranoia, and do various different things. But after all these cards are going to resolve, the mastermind is going to let everybody know if something good or something bad has happened, whether it happens to be the patient moving and then announcing that somebody has died and all the players have lost. And this is the interesting thing about the game. The players are going to lose. They're going to lose multiple times, but don't let this ruin your enjoyment of the game, because that's the point. Because every time they lose, they're going to use this sheet to figure out why they lost, and then they're going to have a certain amount of chances to reset everything, try again, and prevent that bad thing from happening. If the players can go through an entire loop without the bad thing happening, they win the game. But if the mastermind can create chaos and create the bad things and at least cause one bad thing to happen in every single loop, they're going to eventually win the game. So again, this is a game of cat and mouse, a battle of wills between one player versus three other players who are trying to gather all the clues they can gather to try to figure out what the tragedy is and stop the tragedy from happening in Tragedy Looper. Number 35 on the list will surprise absolutely nobody, especially anybody who's watched my prior videos before, because number 35 on my list is Fantastica from Alf Seeger. Now, when I was growing up, I read a lot of classic fantasy novels. I read the Lord of the Rings series, I read the Narnia Chronicles, and I read a very lesser-known novel called The Never-Ending Story. Now, you may be familiar with the movie The Never-Ending Story, which did a couple different changes. One of the biggest changes is it changed the world from Fantastica, name of the game here, to Fantasia, and they made some other changes. And well, let's be honest, the movie was actually only half of the book. Second movie wasn't that great. Third movie was absolutely horrible, but this is about the board game, not about a movie. Now, I never pinned Alf Seeger down and said, is this what you did? But I would be willing to bet, if I was a betting man, if you could pin him down, he would tell you that this game was inspired by the classic Never-Ending Story novel. Because in this game, the players have entered a magical land, and their objective in this magical land is to go on various whimsical quests, and these quests are very whimsical. And again, if you ever read the Never-Ending Story book, you would see the connections between this game and that book in a very fantastic way. Your basic objective is a person, as a player in the game, is you're basically playing a deck building game. Players are going to be having their cards and using their cards to give them actions, where those actions are to move to various locations, capturing other creatures and everything like that, but your eventual goal is to complete these quests. And before you start playing the game, you're going to decide how long of a game you want to play. The longer the game is, the more quest points you need to get, and these quest points are represented by these cups. Now, these quests are going to give rewards anywhere from 1 to 3 points, and again, once somebody gets that victory point condition, they're going to be a winner of the game. But this game has a fantastic whimsical theme, but don't let it deceive you, because that fantastic whimsical theme actually covers up a very fantastically designed, pardon the pun again, fantastic, I'm sorry, but it's a fantastically designed deck building game that incorporates a board into a deck. Now, when this game came out, I believe in, I think 2011, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong, it was a fairly new game where there were not a lot of deck building games that actually use the board. I think you can probably look at Trains was one of them, maybe Mage Knight, but beyond that, there were not a lot of games that involved the deck building mechanics, the throwing a board. And in this game, the board actually matters because the way you're positioning your player, moving around the board, interacting with these various shrines that allow you to do various things such as completing quests, purchasing extra artifacts, and getting extra quests, and even hiring extra creatures to join you on your quests was required by visiting these locations, but all these locations were protected by these various monsters. And you use these monsters to gain various different rewards that allow you to complete these quests, these very whimsical quests, such as the Frozen Wasteland quest, which says, sabotage the storeroom of the Frost Giant Philippe. And to complete that quest, you need to get a whole bunch of candles or firepower. Once you have all that firepower, and you can gain that firepower, such as by hiring a baby dragon. Of course, the baby dragon needs to be subdued by a sword. How do you find a sword? Well, you find a knight. All these cards are connected. It creates this fantastic deck building game. Well, it's a very fantastically designed deck building game. It incorporates a board mechanics, and I haven't even gone into the fact that this game has a lot of expansions. I believe there's 9 expansions for this game, and while I would never throw all 9 expansions in the game at one time, I think it kind of dilutes the fun and the enjoyment of the game. I would never play this game without at least 1 or 2 of the expansions every time I play the game. Whether you're going to throw in the extra expansion that adds an extra event, and these events can add a little bit of randomness to the game, but it definitely fits the theme of the game, and some of these events are good, some of these events are bad, but they still add a lot of fun. Or you can throw in the castle in the air, which allows you to do other quests where you can actually have multiple uses for your peaceful dragons, or various other quests that just add so much gameplay, so much variety, and so much fun to the game of Fantastica, number 35 on my list. Number 34 on the list is Railways of the World. Now, this is probably the first time I'm going to mention it, but I'm probably going to say it a couple more times as I go through my list, especially as we start going higher and we get to one specific game. Not to give away spoilers, but it actually shocked me how low it would be on the list. I thought that game would be easily in my top 10 or maybe top 15. It was actually a lot lower. We haven't got to the game yet, but I'm going to probably re-mention this comment when we get there. But in my mind, there is a diminished return on complexity for reward anytime you play a game. Just to give you a quick overview of what I mean by that, you reach a certain point where a game is just so darn complex for its own darn good that you're no longer having as much fun as the game could be. I mean, complexity is nice. I enjoy complexity. As we get higher on my list, you're going to actually start seeing that I really enjoy a lot of complexity because you're going to start seeing a lot of complex games on this list. But every one of those games, including this one, and this is the point I'm about to make, has a certain amount of reward for the complexity. It's not so engrossing that you miss the point of the game. And that'll make sense as I start going over the list more, but point is going to accentuate what I want to say right here. Railways of the World is on my list as number 34, and I believe it's the only train game on my entire list, which is very interesting because I love train games. But Railways of the World trumped Steam, trumped Age of Steam, and trumped a whole bunch of other train games, and this is the reason why. The amount of complexity for the amount of reward, for the amount of play, and the strategy that goes in the game is a great blend. Those other games add more mechanics, but the amount of reward you get for those mechanics doesn't always make up for the extra mechanics you're throwing into the game. Now, some people may say that the term I'm looking for is fiddly, but I think that's the worst word when you can talk about any kind of board game review. Because in my view, the word fiddly is kind of a cop-out word. It's basically my way of saying, or anybody's way of saying, I don't like this game and I don't know why, so I'm going to call it fiddly. So I don't like to use the word fiddly. I'm going to actually define fiddly, and that to me means the game is more complex than its own good. I love Railways of the World because it is the perfect balance of complexity with reward for the amount of gameplay. So now we've given this loud preamble all out of the way, and why I've explained why Railways of the World just totally trumped every other train game, let me explain to you what Railways of the World is. Railways of the World is a train game where the players start off dead broke. They need to start making loans to start building up their train empire, but they don't want to take out too many loans because if you do, you basically sink your entire empire, and there is zero chance you can win the game. And you're going to watch all the other players getting lots of money, lots of victory points, while your empire, your train empire, slowly dwindles into nothingness. And the way this game works is very simple. You basically start off with level 1 trains. You need to level them up. The more powerful they are, the more cargo they can carry along further lines, give you more victory points. The further you take cargo, the more victory points you gain, and the better your chances of winning the game. It's actually a very simple game to explain, but there's a lot of deep complexities to the game. Due to the multiple maps that all play at various different player counts, such as the Mexico map, which is a fantastic 2 to 3 player map, where you have the Eastern U.S. map, which is a fantastic 4 to 6 player map. There's a British map. There's maps for basically all over the world. There's even the Railways Through Time series, but that's kind of a little, that's a little sci-fi fantasy based, and I don't want that in my train-based games. But like I said, the game's pretty simple. You simply pay the money to build a route. Once you built the route, you claim control of that route, and then you can start using that route to start transporting goods to other cities and gain victory points for those goods. It's really, really simple. The game's going to go on until a certain amount of cities have been completely emptied, and whoever has the most victory points after you pay off all of your debt is going to be the winner of the game. And that's the key to the game. No matter how well you do, if you take on too much debt too fast and bury your empire, there's no way you can win the game. And some people may call that a negative to the game, because this is definitely one of those games where you can sit back halfway through the game, look at how powerful your trains are, look at just how many bonds you've managed to take on for your empire, and say, yeah, guys, I'm not winning this one. I'm just in it for the fun of it. You guys go and have fun and let me know how badly I'm going to win this game. It's a little bit brutal, but I really love Railways of the World. It's a fantastic train empire building game. It's a perfect mix of strategy, depth of strategy, lots of replay thanks to all these fantastic maps, and there's even a Railways Nippon map coming out pretty soon. And it's a game I have already pre-ordered, and I am definitely going to do a review for it when it comes out. Railways of the World, my number 34. Out of all the train games, it's my favorite. Number 33 on the list is actually a newer game, and this is Three Kingdoms Redux. Now, this is the original version of the game. There's actually a newer version of the game that just came out on the market. I think it actually only just came out a month ago, maybe 2 months ago at this point, because Three Kingdoms Redux is the first production from the people who created this game. It's their very first design, and they absolutely knocked it out of the baseball park here. This is a beyond phenomenal game. I cannot harp enough upon how fantastic this game is, and there's only one negative to the game, and it's not even a negative, it's just an absolute gripe, and it's a silly gripe, but I'll cover in just a second. So when I was growing up, I used to play tons and tons of strategy games where I loved military strategy games. It's my favorite genre of game. I was one of those people who could play games such as Civilization and games such as Romance of the Three Kingdoms till 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and look up at the sky and say, oh my God, I think that's the sun coming up. I was that kind of gamer. Three Kingdoms Redux is that kind of game. See, Three Kingdoms Redux takes the classic games such as Nobunaga's Ambition. It takes games such as Romance of the Three Kingdoms and other games along those lines where you're playing one of the Chinese empires and you're trying to take over the land. And this one specifically deals with the Wu, the Shu, and the Wei empires who are trying to take over land. And this is a phenomenal blend of many, many mechanics. It's a worker placement game where players are trying to fight over certain locations that are going to give them certain benefits. It's a game where you're building up your empire, whether you're getting these unification cards or these separation cards, and it matters when you get these cards. If you get these cards too early, they're useless to you. If you get them too late, they're also useless to you. So it also builds up a lot of very interesting things. But there's also a war game going on in this game because you have to start controlling all these provinces. So you have to watch out what all the other players are doing. And the even more fantastic thing about this game is every single player has all of these generals for their empire. You're never going to use all these generals, so it's guaranteeing that there's lots of replay. All these generals have their own special powers, and the best thing, and also I'm going to say the worst thing about the game, and again, it's not worse, I hate using that term, is basically a gripe, and I don't know a way to fix it, so again, I'm going to say it's a gripe. My biggest gripe about the game is it's 3 players only. Not 2 to 3, not 3 to 4, not 2 to 4, it is a 3-player only game. You cannot play with 2, cannot play it with 4, it is a perfect 3-player game. But this is the absolute most fantastic 3-player game you will ever include in your collection. The design on this is absolutely fantastic. Multiple paths to victory, multiple ways to score victory points, multiple paths to win this game. There's no set mechanic with this game, and there's some brilliant mechanics that allow it to make sure that no player is going to be left completely in the dust. Because not to get too much into the mechanics of the game, but 2 players are always going to be aligned against a 3rd player, but that changes who's going to be doing that every single round. And it's a smart mechanic that does it. It's not a foolish mechanic or cheap catch-up mechanic. It's actually brilliantly designed into the game of Three Kingdoms Redux, number 33 on my list. Number 32 on the list is Zombie 15. And now this is one game that I knew was going to cement a place on my top 51 games of all time. You know that zombie game you played that got really, really stressful, got your heartbeat going, and made you just really get into the theme of zombies? Hey, right, doesn't exist. At least it didn't exist until Zombie 15 came out. This is the first, and up to now, the only board game that has ever got my blood pumping, got my blood pressure up, got me excited, got me jumping out of my chair, screaming and hollering as it came down to the wire, because Zombie 15 is a really awesome game that plays in exactly 15 minutes. Okay, yeah, the little negative is it takes 15 minutes to set the game up too, but let's ignore that point because there are nice little cheats you can use. You can download directly from their website to help you put the maps together very quickly, and I definitely recommend you do that. But let's ignore that point because this is a game that plays in exactly 15 minutes. And how does the game play itself? Well, we got a CD, but we're now in the 21st century, so let's go ahead and ignore the CD because this game has done something very, very cool. When you play Zombie 15, you are actually playing the game to a soundtrack. And the soundtrack takes pretty much 15 minutes, and you have 15 minutes to complete the scenario, whatever the scenario may be. And the game comes with lots and lots of scenarios that allow you to go through the game. And there's a total of 20 scenarios available for it. The game comes with 15. There's 5 more you can download. And basically, all the players are teenagers in a survivor in a zombie wasteland. You're trying to find out exactly what happened because for some reason, anybody who's over the age of 18 has just turned into a zombie. And that's been the end of every single adult. Here's the cool thing about the game. You're playing the game to a soundtrack, a very, very stressful soundtrack, where the soundtrack is going to get louder and louder and more intense and more intense, and more zombies are going to come out, and more zombies are going to come out, and you only got so many actions. You need to search, but oh my god, more zombies are going to come out. More zombies are going to be coming out, but you don't know what to do because this game is stressing you out, and that is what is so awesome about the game. Like I said, it's a scenario-based game where your basic objective is just to get through the scenario, whatever that scenario may be. But the problem is there's hordes and hordes of zombies coming, and when you hear growls, the zombie horde is going to grow, and when you get that horde card, that entire horde of zombies gets added to the board, and your life just got very, very difficult. And oh yeah, you only got 15 minutes to get through the scenario. If you fail to do that, you lose. Now, Zombie 15 is easily on my list of top 51 board games because this is the first and only zombie game in my mind that ever got it right. All other zombie games are just pretty much, in my mind, boring kind of games where you're basically just walking around a map, and the zombies could be zombies, they could be bats, they could be rats, they could be little clowns with little hockey masks and knives. It doesn't matter because they don't fit the theme at all. It's just a theme pasted on. This game got it right. This game feels like a zombie apocalypse. It gets your blood pumping, it gets your blood flowing, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. Probably the most fun you ever have in 15 minutes. Zombie 15. Number 31 on the list is Caverna, an awesome, awesome game. But of course, in other unrelated news, air creates oxygen, water is wet, ice is cold, now whatever. Anyways, it almost seems ridiculous to put Caverna on a list because that's like saying all those things. Water is wet. Yeah, Caverna is a fantastic game. And yeah, Caverna is an absolutely fantastic game. You just cannot put it any other way. Caverna basically took the game of Agricola, I'm just kidding. It's Agricola. I'm just playing with you. Anyways, it took the game of Agricola and made the game better. Yes, I said it. This made Agricola a better game. See, Agricola, like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Railways of the World, Agricola was a game that is too brutal for its own good. Remember when I told you about some games just have too much complexity that detracts from the fun of the game because you're losing sight of the fun because there's just too much in the game? Well, Caverna took all of that, lightened it up a little bit, and made the perfect blend of a worker placement game with a fantastic theme, a lot of fun, and a game that anybody can play. Why do I say anybody? Because my youngest son, when he was 7 years old, years ago, when he saw this game at the age of 7, he sat down at the table and I was able to teach him how to play it. Matter of fact, I kept the score sheet because it was such a wonderful event. And nope, it's right here because I top boxed it. I actually wrote the scores on the top of the box. Granted, he didn't get the best score in the world, but he had a phenomenal game. My oldest son joined in the game. He had a phenomenal game, and they both loved this game a lot. I guess I'm giving away a spoiler because I'm going to do their top 10 games. Spoiler alert, this game's on their list. Anyways, what is Caverna? Caverna is a classic worker placement game. We all know what a worker placement game is. If you're watching this video channel, you know what a worker placement game is. You're going to take one of your workers, you're going to put them on one of these locations, and you're going to take the action of this location. First come, first serve until we reset the board at the end of the round. The cool thing about the game is that there's actually cards that are going to randomize the way these extra locations are going to come out We're going to play the game over 12 rounds, and whoever has the most victory points is going to win the game. How do we get victory points? We get victory points by establishing our farm. And if you want to be really cool, you can play your farm at night. I don't recommend you do it, but you can play your farm at night. I recommend playing your farm at day, but it's the exact same thing on both sides of the board. And players can get victory points for building up their caves. They're going to get victory points for building up their farms. And they're going to get victory points for getting farm animals. They're going to get victory points for having more dwarves on the board because we're dwarven farmers, not human farmers. Because dwarven farmers are proven to be 100% better than human farmers. We're going to go out on adventures. We're going to go ahead and increase the abilities of our weapons, which are going to allow us to go on these fantastic adventures. That, yeah, just lets us get more resources, but it's a cool little addition. Everything you're going to do in this game is going to get you victory points, except if you're missing spaces on your board at the end of the game, and if you happen to be missing any of the farm animals at the end of the game, you're going to lose victory points. But pretty much anything else you're going to do is you're going to get victory points, and it's an awesome theme. I never in my life thought I would enjoy a farming game. If somebody told me that, hey, you're going to play a farming game and you're going to enjoy it, I look at them and say, how long ago did you take out the straitjacket? And then I played Grognard and I said, okay, it's my turn to wear the straitjacket because you were absolutely 100% right. Grognard is a fantastic game. It is a wonderful evolution of Agricola. Spoiler alert, Agricola is not on this list because Grognard knocks it handily way hundreds and hundreds of spaces behind because it takes Agricola, removes the bearish parts of the game, and makes a fantastic game that is Grognard. I hope you enjoyed this part of this video list, numbers 40 all the way up to 31. Again, my goal is to put up one of these lists every single week. Next week will be 30 to 21, then we'll do 20 to 11, and then finally we're going to do 10 to 1, and then at the end I'm going to do a little retrospective on this. And also I'm going to include both of my boys' top 10 games of all time. And it's a little bit cheat for them because, hey, if I'm allowed to cheat, so are they. They're actually doing their top 11 list, and their number 11 is a game they want to play more of because it's a game they're liking and they're not sure where it should fall on the list. But you know what? It's my video series. I'm allowing them to cheat because I'm cheating too. Anyways, if you enjoy this video, if you enjoy this video series, and you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I want to see some of your feedback on some of these things I have on my list. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm out of my mind? Are you happy that somebody's bringing back some of these classic games? Because let's be honest, I am not a fan of the cult of the new. I'm not saying the new games are bad. What I am saying is that there are old classic games that do not deserve to disappear just because they're not the cult of the new. Just because they're not brand new doesn't mean they're not good anymore. Matter of fact, they're still absolutely fantastic, and I think this list proves it. If you have any comments or questions, like I said, leave them in the YouTube comments down below. You can also feel free to email me at offtheshelfboardgamereviews. That is OTSBGR@gmail.com. If you enjoy this channel and you want to help support it, think about tossing just one single dollar over in the tip jar over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/OTSBGR. Your donations can help keep the channel going. Because like I said at the beginning of every one of these videos, I'm sponsor free and everything that you see on this channel is all self-funded out of my own pocket. Your dollar can be very much appreciated. It can help bring up more contact for the channel. Also, if you enjoy this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button because it really does matter to me. And thanks for watching. Beep beep. Number 40 on the list is core words. Core words. It's core words. What we're doing is we're trying to do our core math, but with the alphabet. Oh my gosh. I don't even plan this out. I sound this terrible on my own.